I know it's a bit of a meme at this point, just when anything happens ever, it's glow-in-the-darks. But, well, there seems to be evidence for it. And the evidence comes from a news outlet called Revolver, who have documented the court documents of the people who are being charged with trespass and terrorism, or God knows what else, who went in. And they've noted that quite a lot of the people who were there aren't being charged at all.
Ooh.
Which, funny that. And the reason they're not being charged is because they're probably agents of the FBI. So this is the Tucker Carlson clip in which he put this all out, which is fantastic. So we're going to play a couple of clips from this. So let's play the first clip of Tucker Carlson laying this out.
We know that the government is hiding the identity of many law enforcement officers who were present at the Capitol on January 6th, not just the one who killed Ashley Babbitt. According to the government's own court filings, those law enforcement officers participated in the riot, sometimes in violent ways. We know that because, without fail, the government has thrown the book at most people who were present in the Capitol on January 6th. There was a nationwide dragnet to find them, and many of them are still in solitary confinement tonight. But strangely, some of the key people who participated on January 6th have not been charged. Look at the documents. The government calls those people unindicted co-conspirators. What does that mean? Well, it means that in potentially every single case, they were FBI operatives. Really? In the Capitol on January 6th. For example, one of those unindicted co-conspirators is someone government documents identify only as Person 2. According to those documents, Person 2 stayed in the same hotel room as a man called Thomas Caldwell, an insurrectionist, a man alleged to be a member of the group the Oath Keepers. Person 2 also, quote, stormed the barricades at the Capitol on January 6th alongside Thomas Caldwell. The government's indictments further indicate that Caldwell, who, by the way, is a 65-year-old man, this dangerous insurrectionist, was led to believe there would be a, quote, quick reaction force also participating on January 6th. That quick reaction force, Caldwell was told, would be led by someone called Person 3, who had a hotel room and an accomplice with him. But wait, here's the interesting thing. Person 2 and Person 3 were organizers of the riot. The government knows who they are, but the government has not charged them. Why is that? You know why. They were almost certainly working for the FBI. So FBI operatives were organizing the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, according to government documents.
I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, one of the things to make clear, though, is the difference between an informant and an agent, let's say.
Yeah.
So someone who provides information to the government on, I don't know, maybe they say things to the government that doesn't really give them immunity in cases of storming the Capitol, I would imagine, and yet they're not being charged with that. So that makes me think that these people who are not being charged but took place, have connections to the government, are not just informants who provide information occasionally.
Might actually be agents.
Might actually be agents or as he says, co-conspirators, which... but that's just two of them. He says, I mean, the one guy had an accomplice. 3 people? I mean, 3 people be resolved, for all this? No, I mean, you've got a lot of people. I mean, maybe about 20, at least.
20?
You got 20 guys, and you get them to be the ones who break down the barricades and everyone else follows.
There were people with masks doing it as well, weren't there?
Yeah. Turns out there were over 20 people of this kind. Let's play the next clip.
And those two are not alone. In all, Revolver News reported that there are, quote, upwards of 20 unindicted co-conspirators in the Oath Keeper indictments, all playing various roles in the conspiracy, who have not been charged for virtually the exact same activities, and in some cases, much, much more severe activities, as those named alongside them in the indictments. There's a huge difference between using an informant to find out what a group you find threatening might do, and paying people to help organize a violent action, which is what happened, apparently, according to government documents, on January 6th. That's a line, and the FBI has crossed it. And it's not the first time they crossed that line in Michigan. Remember that plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer? We heard a lot about that, and Whitmer was able to cover some of her own incompetence, though not all, by pointing to the fact that she's now a victim. Now, in the FBI's telling of that plot, a whole team of insurrectionists was going to drive a van up to Gretchen Whitmer's vacation house and throw her in the back and drive away. The mastermind of this plot, according to the FBI, was a man called Adam Fox. Who was Adam Fox? Adam Fox turned out to be a homeless guy who was living in the basement of a vacuum repair shop. Quite a guerrilla. It turns out that one of the 5 people in the planned Gretchen Whitmer kidnap van was an FBI agent in the van. Another was an FBI informant. And the feds admitted in these documents that an informant or undercover agent was, quote, usually present in the group's meetings. In other words, using simple math, which we can do even on cable news, nearly half the gang of kidnappers were working for the FBI. Remember the guy who suggested using a bomb to blow up a bridge as part of that plot? That got a lot of coverage. That guy was an undercover FBI agent.
Could you imagine being this guy, the guy who lives in the basement there? He's trying to set up a plot. Literally everyone around you is an FBI agent.
Well, that's happened. I'm sure that's happened.
Well, it almost happened in that case. I mean, with 50% of them being FBI agent.
But I don't know. I'm certain that years ago there was like some sort of terrorist plot, and it just turned out that everyone involved in it was an FBI agent, and so the whole thing had
all terrorists.
Yeah, they thought they were stinging each other basically.
But I mean, the reason I focus on the number there is because if you actually look at the footage, as people have, I mean, this video here is a video of people at the front there, masked up, dressed like white.
Antifa. That's
dressed
what they
like
look
Antifa.
like.
That's why the crowd chanted Antifa. That's why the narrative about, maybe Antifa did it came about. There were a couple of people who were identified as members of B11 Antifa who turned up.
Yeah, they were.
But these guys, I mean, they're all masked up. You can see it's just two of them there, bashing down an entrance, and then loads of people around them not doing that. Because that's all you really
They
need.
look quite concerned, actually. It's like, what are these guys doing?
Well, they're chanting no, and we'll play that clip in a minute. But one of the things I want to mention is like the 3%ers are another group which was present, and the concept of the 3%ers is only 3% of the population need to rise up to overthrow the government.
Right, okay.
And it's the same principle with riots, really, and the police know this as well. That's why when you're operating in a riot situation...
Oh, look, there's someone actively trying to stop them and then shoving them out of the way.
Yeah. So in a riot situation, the police will look for highly aggressive individuals and then grab them, pull them out. And they know once you do that with just a handful of the most aggressive,
and then the
whole thing is not a threat. And it's the same case in this, in which you can just see the footage. So let's play the next clip here of people chanting no at them breaking it down.
Use what you got.
So you can see all the Trump supporters in their flags and whatnot chanting no, boo, no Antifa.
Yeah.
And you got these guys in black clad bashing down the windows there. I mean, I'm not denying that there would be Trump supporters bashing down the windows, but it's interesting how you don't need many people. You certainly don't need many people. And if you've got upwards of 20 FBI informants / agents already in the Oath Keepers group, never mind 3%ers and all the rest of it, the other groups. I mean, how many have you got there? And this isn't the only time like weird stuff happens, as you mentioned, with the example of the terrorist group. I mean, this is a funny one in which undercover cops posing as drug dealers arrest undercover cops posing as drug buyers.
I mean, in 2019 as well.
Yeah, I mean, this happens all the time. Spider-Man meme there. But anyway, so if we go to the next link, this is something that has been commented on more broadly and for a long time. So this is a movie called The Day Shall Come by Chris Morris. Chris Morris is the guy who did the movie Four Lions, Brass Eye, The Day to Day, Satire. And the concept of Four Lions is it took you on with a real terrorist group, suicide cell, and made you see how them as a group work. This movie, The Day Shall Come, is about a guy who's clearly not a terrorist. And one of the sad truths about the FBI is since 9/11, they've come up with this way of doing things in which they find someone who's clearly just nuts and not a terrorist, surround him with FBI agents, get him to make something up, and then arrest him for plotting terrorism. And Chris Morris lays this out. So if we go to the next link here, this is an interview on Channel 4. And if we play the clip, this is him explaining exactly that.
Who is the biggest recruiter of terrorists in the USA? And two, what would you do if you were broke, about to lose your house, and someone offered you 100 grand? And that's really, the answer to the first question is, rather surprisingly, the biggest recruiter of terrorists in the States is the FBI. And the answer to the second one gives you the clue as to how our story works. Because the FBI have accidentally, it seems, developed a system which works rather well. And the system is they make up a terrorist plot, they find someone to try and carry it out, and they arrest them for doing that. Supposedly, the biggest plot since 9/11, about an army planning to launch a full ground war on the US, based in Miami. And it turned out, 3 years later, I bumped into somebody involved in the trial who said that ground war was actually 7 construction workers who were going to ride into Chicago on horses. This was not a really serious terrorist plot. They had just been wound up by an FBI informant. They had no money, the informant was offering a lot of cash, and so they riffed a crazy scheme to try and get this guy out of money. The FBI spent 18 months winding up a schizophrenic in Boston to come up with a ludicrous plan to fly model aeroplanes into the dome of the Capitol.
The theme of
At the same time, they said the Tsarnaev brothers were harmless. Now, that is because, at least in part, it's easier to wind up the mad guy and get him to do something ridiculous and then say, I've saved the city. The trouble was that that effort was taken away from examining what was really happening.
So, I mean, there's the thing. The FBI has a habit of this for 2 decades now, at least. And
Well,
Chris-
I should have looked this up in advance of the podcast, but someone in the chat or post a comment to correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm sure that the FBI were connected to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.
some of the mess ups there or something.
I'm absolutely sure that they provided the materials or something like that to the guy who committed the attack. I'm certain of it.
So,
Fact check me.
But for the instance that he's giving there, which is a similar one, but it's you take the mad guy, you make him say something stupid, you offer him a lot of money, and then as soon as he says the stupid thing, you arrest him.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a process they've been doing for 2 decades. And, okay, you've got that. And then you've got these court documents, which the government is saying themselves, we're not charging person 2, 3, and so on and so forth, because there are guys who are at the Capitol riots there, and they were engaging, as Tucker says, in worse acts than the people who are being charged. So presumably they're the ones breaking property, not just standing around and filming. So those are the guys at the front. We can see that there's a few number of them. They're not a huge number of the crowd, as you would expect in any situation like this. There's nothing there. That's actually a really good point raised by Tucker, and he continues this point with some other stuff as well. So this is the next link here, in which he talks about he talked with, I think, some representative. He says that the government is continuing to hide footage. So the government has like 10,000 hours of footage from security cameras all around the building, because it's government cameras, that they haven't released. And this is in the middle of us trying to, the Congress trying to figure out what happened. And it's like, just give us the footage. What do you think's in the footage? Like, it's an office. It's not the headquarters of the FBI. But okay. And then also refusing.
I mean, it's a public building as well, so it's not like the public don't go to it. So
I don't know. And then they also won't identify the officer who killed Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt being a pretty egregious example. You can argue she was trespassing, but the shooting isn't justified even as someone who would be sympathetic to someone trying to enforce the law and other shootings and whatnot. Because in that case, you had her there. Okay, there's a door, and then there's the entrance to the Capitol with the guy with the gun. Behind her are armed police officers who could be seen by the shooter.
Yeah.
So when she jumps up and tries to break in, sure, she's trying to break in. That doesn't justify deadly force. She doesn't have a weapon. There are police officers behind her.
Yeah.
Those have got weapons. It's a really weird shooting, and it's strange they haven't identified the officer. Presumably because he's Secret Service or something. But, as Tucker says, what are they trying to hide? I mean, why are they hiding the footage? Why are there so many FBI agents involved? So Matt Gaetz has apparently written to the FBI to ask them exactly this, because you would, wouldn't you? So he writes in here, he gives some questions to the FBI. To what extent were the 3 primary militia groups, the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and 3 Percenters, infiltrated by agencies of the federal government? How many federal undercover agents or informants were present at the Capitol, and what role did they play? And also, how many unindicted co-conspirators were FBI, Army counterintel, etc.? So, how many of your guys were there? How many of them were engaged in the rioting itself? And the ones that were suddenly not going to charge, compared to those who are being charged with lesser offensive, and how many of you infiltrated? Which fair thing to ask.
Reasonable questions that I would like the answers to.
He's not the only one. Marjorie Taylor has also done the same thing. She's raising questions about this, and it seems like a responsible thing to do in this case, because you do want to find out, surely. And Twitter have decided, nah, cut the feed. So, if we go to the next link, you can see here. Yeah. So if we can scroll down first, so we can read what Twitter have written. So Tucker Carlson was trending, because this is a good point he raised. And in here, Twitter put a notice. Federal law does not permit cooperating witnesses or informants to be charged with conspiracy, despite a baseless suggestion by Tucker Carlson that some co-conspirators of the January 6th attack on the US Capitol were not charged because they were undercover FBI agents.
Why is that baseless?
That doesn't make any sense. The first part of that statement confirms the second part of that statement. So if you can close that and go back to Jack Posobiec, because Jack Posobiec, being someone who would know in this instance, makes a perfect point. First part of this headline confirms the second part of this headline, but Twitter calls it baseless anyway. Did a human even write this?
Yeah.
Because it makes no sense. We have the government documents.
I mean, no, but it's fine. Okay, that's fine. Let's assume that there is a slight gap here into which we can insert doubt. What does it get filled with? Why is the Biden administration and their FBI not want to charge the other co-conspirators who broke into the Capitol? Why some and not others?
Because presumably they're agents. I mean, as John's pointing out,
Or
Agents and
informants,
informants are different things, and if they're just informants, well, they could be charged, presumably. But there's a whole bunch of them we have on the court documents who are not being
Well,
charged.
no, it says that it doesn't allow witnesses or informants to be charged.
So that doesn't make any sense, though.
But if Twitter. Well, what's the reason?
Yeah.
Why are they not being charged? I want to know, and I think everyone else wants to know.
But I love that, and we'll go to the next link, which is Tucker responding to Twitter on this, and he makes the great point, which is like, well, how come Twitter's claiming that they know better than the U.S. government on this? Because the U.S. government hasn't charged them on that basis. So let's go to the final clip and play this.
Well, last night, clips from our show began to circulate on social media. The tech monopolies, which helped get Joe Biden elected, continue to work closely with the administration to control the news and information that you are allowed to see. Because it's America, right? Well, this piece of news, the one on our show last night, was a problem for them, so they tried to make it go away. Twitter appended the following note to our clip last night, quote, "Federal law does not permit cooperating witnesses or informants to be charged with conspiracy, despite a baseless suggestion by Tucker Carlson that some co-conspirators of the January 6th attack were not charged because they were undercover FBI agents." End quote. Let's think about this. Now, leave aside for a second the most obvious question that arises from the statement, which is, how would Twitter, which is a media company, not as far as we know, a law enforcement agency, be able to confirm our reporting last night was, quote, baseless? How would they know that? Does Twitter somehow have access to the FBI's personnel files? We don't know. We hope someone finds out. But consider the statement more broadly. Twitter is saying that people who are secretly working with the FBI cannot be charged for encouraging others to commit crimes. Well, yes, exactly. That's the very point we made on this show last night. That's why they haven't been charged, because they were secretly working with the FBI. So in an effort to shut us down, Twitter just confirmed what we suggested was true. Thanks, Twitter.
It's just so stupid.
And again, Twitter has to answer the question then. If you're the arbiter of truth on this, why weren't they charged? Why were some charged and not others? Give us a reason.
Name which members are the FBI agents, Twitter. Because presumably, as Tucker points out, you have access to the personnel files. Otherwise, how can you say it's baseless?
But just, like, there has to be some reason. What was the arbitrary decision of the FBI and the Biden administration here? What's the reason?
But also, what an amazing thing. Because, I mean, nothing happened from the Capitol invasion. Because it's just like, right, I mean, as we pointed out a million times, you get in and like, we got the Capitol. Now what?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm going to walk around with a lectern.
Like, I'll go to Nancy Pelosi's office and pee on her desk. Nothing was going to happen. There was nothing there to be done. And, so there was a complete nothing burger. And one has to wonder, I mean, if you are the FBI and you have an axe to grind with Trump, and the CIA
Which they did.
had an axe to grind with Trump later on in his presidency as well, and you have a bunch of agents who have infiltrated a crowd outside of the Capitol, why not get them just to break it down and work everyone in, and then make sure Trump can't come back? I mean, it is a theory. It has some evidence, but not proven. Just make that clear, YouTube. But the thing is like, well, okay, that's actually something to be looking at, and I'm glad that Republican representatives are asking those questions.
If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.